Eun-suk had survived 15 years in the Korean Texan underworld by trusting his instincts. The prickling at the back of his neck during a deal, the weight of a room before someone pulled a trigger. But standing at the altar of Dallas Cathedral, adjusting his silver cufflinks under the weight of 200 elite eyes, his instincts screamed one word: run. He didn't. The afternoon sun poured through the stained glass, painting Sino-Korean's veil in fractured reds and golds. She looked like a bride from a magazine, the kind of woman his family called appropriate, the kind who understood that marriage was merger, not romance. The 3-carat diamond on her finger caught the light, a flawless symbol of everything this union represented: alliance, power, survival. Everything except the one thing Eun-suk had locked away in a part of himself he refused to acknowledge. The priest's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling, words Eun-suk had heard at a dozen syndicate weddings. He could recite them in his sleep. Behind him, Texas oil magnates sat beside Korean crime lords, their silk suits hiding the same truth. This wedding wasn't about love. It was about the merger of two empires, one built on black gold, the other on blood. Sino-Korean's whisper cut through his thoughts. "You're gripping my hand too tight." He loosened his hold, forcing his face into the mask he'd perfected over decades. Calm, controlled. A man who'd made peace with his choices. But his neck tattoo, the serpent that marked his rank in the syndicate, itched beneath his collar like a brand trying to burn its way out. Around him, the cathedral felt suffocating. Lilies choked the air with their too-sweet perfume. Candles flickered like dying stars. The guests sat motionless, their faces frozen in polite attention, but Eun-suk knew what they were really watching for. Weakness, hesitation, any crack in the armor that would signal vulnerability. He had none to give, or so he thought. The priest reached the part of the ceremony Eun-suk had been dreading. If any person can show just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed should have been absolute. In the underworld, no one interrupted a syndicate wedding. It was suicide. Then the doors moved. Not a gentle creak, a violent groan of ancient oak and iron, the sound of something being forced open against its will. Sunlight flooded the dim sanctuary like a spotlight on a stage, and every head turned. Eun-suk's heart slammed against his ribs. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the Texas sun, a silhouette he would have recognized in his sleep. Melissa Morrow, the woman he'd loved in secret, the woman he'd left without explanation, the woman whose number he'd blocked that very morning when it appeared on his phone with 17 missed calls. She wore yellow, vibrant, defiant, impossible to ignore. The silk fabric stretched over a belly so round it stole the breath from his lungs. But she wasn't alone. 3 little boys walked beside her, moving down the aisle with military precision. They wore matching red blazers, their small hands clasped in front of them, their faces solemn and focused. As they stepped into the light, Eun-suk saw what every single person in that cathedral saw. They had his eyes, the same dark, almond shape, the same sharp intelligence, the same bone structure that marked them as his blood, undeniable and absolute. Melissa stopped halfway down the aisle. Her finger rose, pointed directly at him like a weapon, and her voice, steady, clear, carrying the weight of 5 years of silence, cut through the sanctuary. "You ignored my calls for 5 years, Eun-suk." Her eyes locked on his, and in them, he saw no tears, no pleading, just a cold, unshakable resolve. "You won't ignore us today." The congregation erupted in whispers. Sino-Korean's hand went limp in his. His father stood from the front pew, his cane tapping the marble like a judge's gavel. But Eun-suk couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the 3 boys, Finn, Quinn, and Flynn. The names burned into his mind from intelligence reports he'd paid a fortune to bury, and realized the unthinkable. They weren't just hers, they were his. The math was simple, devastating, undeniable. And as Melissa took another step forward, her hand moving to cradle her swollen belly, Eun-suk understood with perfect crystalline clarity. The life he'd built on lies was about to collapse, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. But to understand how the heir to a billion-dollar empire ended up standing at an altar with a loaded gun under his jacket and a woman in yellow unraveling his entire world, you have to go back 5 years. Back to the night Eun-suk made a choice that would haunt him every day since. Back to the woman he thought he was protecting by walking away. Back to Melissa Morrow, and the secret that should have stayed buried forever. If you're still here, you felt that twist. Share this with someone who loves a story that doesn't let go. Comment where you're from, hit subscribe, and let's see how deep this goes together. 5 years of silence shattered in the span of a heartbeat. Melissa moved down the aisle with the kind of certainty that comes from burning every bridge behind you. Her yellow dress clung to her curves, the silk catching light like molten gold, and Yoon-suk watched her the way a drowning man watches the surface. Desperate, helpless, knowing he was already too far gone. She was more beautiful than his memories had allowed. Her dark skin glowed against the cathedral's cold stone, her long hair cascading over one shoulder in waves that made his fingers ache with the phantom memory of touching them. But it was her eyes, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him like he was worth saving, that destroyed him. They held no softness now, only accusation. The 3 boys walked in perfect formation beside her, their small shoulders squared, their faces eerily calm for children their age. The red blazers they wore were pristine, tailored, expensive, but it was their eyes that made Yoon-suk's blood run cold. His eyes, not just the shape, though that alone would have been damning. It was the way the middle child, Quinn, his mind supplied without permission, surveyed the room with the same tactical precision Yoon-suk used before entering hostile territory. The way Finn, the tallest, kept his hand near his brother's shoulder in a protective stance Yoon-suk had learned at 6 years old. The way Flynn's jaw was set in stubborn defiance that mirrored Yoon-suk's own reflection. They weren't just his children. They were his legacy, walking proof of the man he'd tried to bury beneath silk suits and syndicate codes. Yoon-suk. Melissa's voice cut through the chaos of whispers erupting around them. She stopped 10 feet from the altar, her hand resting on her swollen belly, a gesture that made something primal and possessive roar to life in his chest. "Look at me!" He hadn't stopped. Behind him, Sino-Korean's breathing had gone shallow. To his left, his father rose from the pew like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. The old man's cane struck marble once, twice, the sound echoing like gunshots. But Yoon-suk couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the mathematics of devastation standing before him. 3 boys. 5 years. One night he'd convinced himself was mercy. Melissa's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You thought ignoring me would make us disappear." Her voice was steady, conversational even. But beneath it ran a current of fury so controlled it was terrifying. "You thought if you blocked my number, deleted my emails, paid off anyone who might tell you the truth, that you could just what? Forget?" "Melissa." His voice cracked on her name, raw and unfamiliar. "Don't." She held up one finger, and the gesture was so reminiscent of the woman who used to scold him for working too late that his heart fractured. "You don't get to say my name like it means something. Not after you erased me like I was a mistake you could pay to fix." Finn stepped forward, his small hand reaching for his mother's, and the protective gesture, so adult, so wrong for a 5-year-old, made Yoon-suk's throat close. "We tried calling," Finn said, his voice clear and cold. 17 times this morning. The number hit Yoon-suk like a fist. 17 missed calls. 17 times he'd seen unknown Austin flash across his screen and dismissed it as a distraction, a complication he couldn't afford on his wedding day. "I didn't know," he started. "You didn't want to know," Melissa corrected. Her hand pressed against her belly again, and this time Yoon-suk saw her wince. Subtle, quick, but there. His instincts, honed by 15 years of reading threats, screamed. "Are you hurt?" The question left him before thought, before strategy, before the mask he'd worn for 200 witnesses. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or pain? Concern now? She laughed, but the sound held no humor. 5 years too late, Yoon-suk. 5 years of raising your sons alone. 5 years of watching them ask why their father didn't want them. 5 years of building a life from the wreckage you left behind. She took another step forward, and now he could see the fine tremor in her hands, the tightness around her mouth that spoke of physical strain beneath the fury. And you know what the worst part is? Her voice dropped to something intimate, something meant only for him despite the audience of elites watching their world implode. I would have forgiven all of it. The abandonment, the silence, the cowardice. I would have let you walk away clean if you just answered the phone this morning. Why? The word tore from him. What happened? Melissa's smile turned sharp. You'll find out. But first... She looked past him to Sino-Korean, who stood frozen in her white lace like a porcelain doll someone had forgotten to animate. First, I think your bride deserves to know the truth. Sino-Korean's voice, when it came, was honey over razors. I already know. She moved forward, her veil lifting like a ghost's shroud, and Yoon-suk saw something in her eyes that made his blood ice over. "Did you think you were the only one with secrets, darling?" The endearment was poison. Melissa's posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Defense, recognition, fear, and Yoon-suk realized with perfect clarity that he'd walked into a trap. Not at the altar. Before. Months before. Maybe years. "Who are you?" he asked Sino-Korean, and his hand moved instinctively toward the weapon holstered beneath his jacket. She smiled. Someone who's been waiting a very long time for this moment. Behind them, his father's cane struck marble again. This time, it was followed by the unmistakable sound of safeties clicking off. The syndicate soldiers positioned throughout the cathedral, men Yoon-suk had hand-selected for their loyalty, had drawn their weapons. But they weren't aiming at Melissa. They were aiming at him, time crystallized into fragments of sensation. The weight of 15 guns trained on his spine, the scent of lilies turning sickly sweet, the sound of Melissa's sharp inhale as she pulled the boys behind her with the fierce instinct of a mother who'd already lost too much. Yoon-suk didn't reach for his weapon, didn't move. Every syndicate soldier in that cathedral had been trained by him, had sworn blood oaths to him, and now they stood with steady hands and colder eyes, waiting for the order to end him. From his father, "You disappointed me, boy." The old man's voice carried the particular quiet that preceded violence. He moved into the aisle, his cane a mere prop now, his steps sure despite the years. "I gave you every chance to do this clean. Every chance to marry the girl, secure the merger, and keep your bastards buried where they belonged." The word bastards landed like a blade, and Yoon-suk saw Finn's small hand curl into a fist. Too much understanding in that gesture. Too much rage inherited from the blood running through his veins. "Stand down," Yoon-suk said, his voice carrying the command that had built an empire. Not to his father, to his men. None of them moved. Sino-Korean laughed, the sound crystalline and cruel. She reached up, unpinning her veil with the casual grace of someone shedding a costume. Beneath it, her face was beautiful and empty. "Did you really think I wanted to marry you? That I spent 6 months pretending to care about your tortured soul routine because I found you charming?" She stepped off the altar, moving toward Melissa with predatory ease. "I was sent to finish what should have been handled 5 years ago," she continued. "But unlike the amateurs your father hired, I don't miss." Yoon-suk's hand finally moved to his weapon, but 3 red laser sights appeared on his chest before he could clear leather. "Don't." His father's command was absolute. "You move, and the woman watches you die before we deal with her." Melissa's eyes found his across the chaos, and in them he saw something that gutted him more than any bullet could. Resignation. She'd known. Not the specifics maybe, but the shape of it. She'd known walking into this cathedral was walking into an execution, and she'd done it anyway. For him, for the father of her children who'd thrown her away like she was disposable. "Why?" Yoon-suk asked. And the question encompassed everything. The betrayal, the guns, the 5 years of silence his father had apparently orchestrated. "Why not just kill me? Why this?" "Because I needed you compliant," his father said. "I needed you to marry the Park girl, sign the merger documents, and transfer the offshore accounts before you became a liability. But you couldn't even do that right. You kept looking for her." He jerked his chin toward Melissa. "Kept paying investigators to confirm she was alive. Kept watching her from a distance like some lovesick fool." The admission hit Yoon-suk like a revelation. "You knew." "Of course I knew. I know everything." The old man's smile was paternal and poisonous, including the fact that she's not just pregnant. She's in labor. Melissa's face drained of color. Sino-Korean moved faster than expected, closing the distance to Melissa in 3 strides. She reached for Quinn, who stood closest, and Melissa's arm shot out, blocking her with a mother's instinct. "Touch my son," Melissa said, her voice dropping to something feral, "and you'll find out exactly what 5 years of single motherhood teaches you about survival." Sino-Korean's hand moved to the small of her back, where the line of her dress suggested a weapon. Yoon-suk made his choice. He drew. The cathedral exploded into motion. 15 soldiers shifted aim, compensating for his movement, but Yoon-suk wasn't aiming at them. His weapon pointed at the stained glass window behind his father, the massive centerpiece depicting St. Michael, worth more than most houses, and more importantly, rigged with the emergency exit protocol Yoon-suk had installed 3 years ago for exactly this kind of scenario. "Everyone out," he said, and his voice carried the weight of every kill he'd made, every order he'd given, every line he'd crossed to become the man standing in this cathedral with a gun in his hand and the woman he loved in the crosshairs of his own family. "Or I blow the window and this entire ceremony becomes a federal crime scene." His father's expression didn't change. "You won't." "I already did." Yoon-suk's finger rested on the trigger, and the laser sights on his chest trembled. Uncertainty. His men had been trained to obey him, and that training warred with their current orders. "The moment I drew, the fail-safe activated. You've got 90 seconds before the silent alarm trips and every federal agency in Dallas descends on this place." It was a bluff. Mostly. The fail-safe existed, but the timer was 5 minutes, not 90 seconds. His father's eyes narrowed, calculating odds, measuring costs. Then he smiled. "You think the FBI scares me? We own half of them, not the half that's been investigating the park oil laundering for 3 years. Yoon-suk shifted his aim fractionally, and everyone in the room understood the threat. Not the window. His father. Not the half that would love to have the head of the song syndicate gift wrapped at a crime scene with 200 witnesses. Silence. Melissa's breathing had gone shallow, her hand pressed against her belly in a way that made Yoon-suk's chest constrict. She was running out of time. They all were. "Let them go," Yoon-suk said. "Melissa and the boys. Let them walk out of here, and I'll stay. I'll sign whatever you want, transfer whatever you want, but they walk." "No." Melissa's voice cut through, sharp and absolute. "We're not doing this." "Not again." He looked at her, and the distance between them, 10 feet that might as well have been miles, ached with everything they'd never said. "Please," he said, and the word cost him. "You have to trust me." "Trust you?" Her laugh was broken glass. "You left me bleeding on a bathroom floor 5 years ago because your father made a phone call. You think one grand gesture erases that?" The room went still. "What?" Yoon-suk's voice was barely a whisper. Melissa's eyes shone, but no tears fell. "You don't even know, do you? You don't know what happened the night you disappeared." His father's cane struck marble. "Enough." But Melissa wasn't finished. "I was pregnant, Yoon-suk. 3 months. And when you vanished without a word, her voice cracked. "I fell apart. Literally. I hemorrhaged. Alone. I almost died bringing your sons into this world because you weren't there to call 911. The words detonated like grenades. Yoon-suk's hand wavered, the gun dropping half an inch. "And you want to know the worst part?" Melissa continued, her voice gaining strength from fury. "I would do it all again, every painful, terrifying moment, because she pulled the boys closer, "are worth more than your entire empire, more than your father's approval, more than whatever cowardly guilt is eating you alive right now." Sino-Korean chose that moment to move, her hand clearing her weapon with professional precision, but she wasn't aiming at Melissa. She was aiming at Finn. The world slowed to the thickness of honey. Yoon-suk saw Sino-Korean's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Melissa lunge forward, her pregnant body moving with the desperate physics of maternal instinct. Saw Finn, 6 years old, barely tall enough to ride the roller coasters, do something that stopped Yoon-suk's heart. The boy smiled. Not fear. Not surprise. A cold, calculated smile that belonged on a man 3 times his age. Then Finn's small hand emerged from his red blazer pocket, holding a phone. "I wouldn't," the child said, his voice carrying the same terrifying calm Yoon-suk used in negotiations. "Not unless you want everyone here to see what's been uploading for the last 4 minutes." Sino-Korean froze. "What?" "The ledger," Finn said simply. "Every offshore account, every shell company, every name in the syndicate's network. It's all going to the cloud right now. Mom's insurance policy." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Soldiers shouted. His father lunged forward. Sino-Korean's weapon swung toward the child with lethal intent. Yoon-suk didn't think, didn't calculate odds or strategize exits. He threw himself between the gun and his son. The shot that followed was deafening in the vaulted space, but the bullet didn't find flesh. Yoon-suk had closed the distance faster than Sino-Korean could compensate, his hand catching her wrist and twisting with the brutal efficiency of 15 years in the underworld. Her weapon clattered to marble. Then he had her throat in his hand. "You aimed at my child," he said, and his voice was something primordial. "Not the syndicate heir, not the businessman, the father. That was your last mistake." "Yoon-suk, don't!" Melissa's shout cut through the red haze. He looked at her, At this woman who'd survived him, who'd built life from the wreckage he'd left, who'd walked into hell with her children to save the man who'd abandoned her. Her eyes held no plea for mercy, only truth. This isn't who you are, not anymore. His hand loosened. Sino-Korean collapsed to the floor, gasping. "We're leaving," Yoon-suk said, his voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. He moved to Melissa's side, his body positioned between her and every threat in the room. "All of us. You can kill me, but you'll have to explain to the federal agents." He checked his watch. Arriving in 3 minutes, why the heir to the Song Empire died in a cathedral full of weapons and scared children. His father's expression was stone. "You're bluffing. Try me." Eun-suk's hand found Melissa's, and the contact, skin against skin after 5 years, sent electricity up his arm. She didn't pull away. "I've got nothing left to lose. You have everything to lose." His father gestured to the boys, to Melissa's swollen belly. "You walk out that door, and I will hunt them. Every day, every moment. They will never be safe. Then you'll have to go through me," Yoon-suk said. And we both know how that ends. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Melissa's hand tightened on his, and she made a sound, small, pained, involuntary. Yoon-suk looked down and saw what he'd been too focused on survival to notice. The yellow silk of her dress was darker at the hem, wet. Her water had broken. "Oh God," she whispered, and for the first time since she'd walked into the cathedral, fear cracked through her armor. "Eun-suk, I can't. Not here." He swept her into his arms before conscious thought, before strategy, before anything except the visceral understanding that the mother of his children was in labor and every second counted. "Move," he commanded the soldiers, and something in his voice, something older than the syndicate, more fundamental than loyalty or fear, made them step aside. He carried Melissa down the aisle, his sons falling into formation around him. Finn still held the phone, the screen showing an upload progress bar, 87%. Behind them, his father's voice carried like a curse. "This isn't over." Yoon-suk didn't look back. The cathedral doors opened onto blinding Texas sun, and the contrast was violent. Darkness to light, death to life, past to whatever terrifying future waited beyond those steps. A black SUV idled at the curb, not one of his. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a face Yoon-suk recognized. Marcus Webb, his college roommate, the one person he'd trusted before the syndicate had claimed him completely, called in a favor, Marcus said. "Melissa's been updating me. Figured you'd need an exit." Yoon-suk didn't question the miracle. He slid Melissa into the back seat, her face pale with pain, her breathing coming in short gasps. The boys climbed in after, Finn's small hand still clutching the phone. "Hospital," Yoon-suk said. "No." Melissa grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "They'll find us there. Your father owns half the medical staff in Dallas. Then where?" She met his eyes, and in them he saw 5 years of planning, 5 years of preparing for this exact moment. "The ranch," she said. "Outside Austin. It's safe. I made sure of it." Yoon-suk looked at Marcus, who nodded. "I know the place. 30 minutes if I push it. Then push it." The SUV pulled away from the cathedral, leaving behind 200 witnesses, a jilted bride with murder in her eyes, and the smoking ruins of everything Yoon-suk had been. In the back seat, Melissa's hand found his again, and this time, she squeezed. "I need you to know something," she said, her voice tight with pain. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. I came because your father's men showed up at my house this morning with orders to take the boys. That's why I called. That's why I came." The words settled like lead in his stomach. They were going to take them? His voice was hollow. To Korea. Permanently. He was going to erase them. Erase us. She breathed through a contraction, her whole body tensing. "So I took the only leverage I had, the truth, and I weaponized it." "The ledger," Yoon-suk said, understanding flooding through him. "You've been building a case." "For 5 years," Quinn piped up from the front seat, his voice proud. "Mom's really smart." Flynn nodded enthusiastically. "She taught us everything. How to encrypt files, how to recognize threats, how to survive." Finn held up the phone, and Yoon-suk saw the progress bar hit 100%. Upload complete. Every federal agency just got a copy. Cloud storage. Encrypted. Unrecoverable. Yoon-suk stared at his 6-year-old son, this child he'd never met, never held, never taught, and saw himself reflected back with devastating clarity. "You turned my sons into soldiers," he said to Melissa, and the words held no accusation, only awe. I turned them into survivors, she corrected, because you weren't there to protect them. The truth of it was a knife between his ribs. I'm sorry, he said, and the words were pathetically inadequate. Melissa, Don't. She cut him off, her eyes fierce despite the pain. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't give me any of the speeches you've been rehearsing in your head for 5 years. She leaned closer, and he could smell her, vanilla and something uniquely hers, a scent memory that had haunted his dreams. If you want my forgiveness, you earn it. You show up. You stay. You become the man I thought you were before your father convinced you that love was weakness. Another contraction hit, harder this time, and she doubled over. Unsok's hand moved to her back, supporting her through the wave of pain, and something inside him, something that had been frozen since the night he'd walked away, began to thaw. I'll stay, he said. I swear to you, Melissa, I'll stay. She looked at him, searching for the lie, searching for the escape clause he'd always kept hidden. She didn't find one. Okay, she whispered, then stay. The SUV raced through Dallas traffic, carrying a broken family toward an uncertain future, while behind them, the syndicate began to burn. The ranch appeared through heat shimmer like a mirage, weathered wood, endless fields, the kind of Texas sanctuary that existed outside time and bloodlines. Marcus killed the engine, and the sudden silence was disorienting after 30 minutes of road noise and Melissa's labored breathing. Mom? Finn's voice was small now, the 6-year-old breaking through the soldier's mask. Are you okay? I'm okay, baby. Melissa's smile was strained but genuine. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, then Quinn's, then Flynn's. I need you boys to be brave a little longer. Unsok was already out of the vehicle, moving around to her door with the efficiency of a man who'd made too many emergency extractions. But this was different. This wasn't an asset or an ally. This was Melissa, and she was having his child. He lifted her from the back seat, and she didn't protest, didn't insist she could walk. Her arms went around his neck, and the trust in that gesture, after everything, nearly broke him. Inside, Marcus called, already at the front door with a key. I stocked supplies last week when Melissa called. Medical kit, clean linens, everything you'll need. The boys followed them into the ranch house, their red blazers incongruous against the rustic interior. Someone, Melissa, he realized, had prepared this place. Photos lined the mantel. The triplets as infants, as toddlers, growing up in frames that chronicled the life Unsok had missed. He carried Melissa to the bedroom Marcus indicated, and the space was clean, ready, a birthing suite assembled in the middle of nowhere. How long have you been planning this? He asked as he laid her on the bed. Since the day you left. She gripped his hand as another contraction hit, and her nails dug into his palm hard enough to leave crescents. I knew your father would never stop. Knew he'd come for them eventually. So I built contingencies. The ledger, the ranch, Marcus. Unsok knelt beside the bed, his hand still caught in hers. You've been waging war alone. Not alone. She gestured to the doorway where the boys stood, watching with those 2 old eyes. I had them, and they had me. Quinn stepped forward, his small face serious. Are you going to leave again? The question was a bullet, clean and true. Unsok looked at his son, this child he should have raised, should have protected, should have known, and understood that whatever answer he gave would define everything that followed. No, he said, and the word was a vow. I'm not leaving. Not your mother. Not you. Not ever again. You said that before, Flynn accused, his voice wobbling. Mom told us. You said you'd come back. I did. Unsok's throat closed. And I was wrong. I was a coward who believed his father's lies about keeping you safe by staying away. But I know the truth now. What truth? Finn demanded, and his hand moved to his pocket, to that phone that had held enough evidence to destroy an empire. That love isn't weakness, Unsok said. It's the only thing strong enough to burn down everything else. Melissa made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and then her body seized with a contraction that made all of them flinch. Boys, Marcus called from the doorway. Come help me in the kitchen. Your mom needs space. They hesitated, torn between obedience and fear. Go, Melissa managed. I'm okay. I've done this before. But you were alone before, Quinn protested. She's not alone now, Unsok said, and met each of their eyes in turn. I'm here. I promise you. I'm here." They went, reluctant but trusting, and Yoon-sok was left with the woman he'd loved and lost and found again in the wreckage of his own making. "You can't promise them that," Melissa said when the boys were gone. "Your father is about to be arrested." Yoon-sok pulled out his own phone, checking the secure app he'd installed years ago. The ledger Finn uploaded? It won't just destroy the syndicate. It'll trigger every investigation my father has been dodging for 2 decades. By tomorrow, he'll be in federal custody. And you? I made a deal, he admitted. 3 years ago, when I realized what my father was planning, I've been feeding information to a task force in exchange for immunity. For you, for the children I suspected existed but couldn't confirm. Melissa stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps between contractions. You've been betraying my father since the day I realized he tried to have you killed. Yoon-sok's hand found her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. I couldn't come back to you while he was still a threat, couldn't risk leading him to you. So I burned it all down from the inside. You should have told me. I should have done a lot of things. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers, starting with never leaving in the first place. Her hands found his face, holding him there in the small space between them where 5 years of pain and love existed in equal measure. I hate you, she whispered. I know. I love you. I know. I'm terrified you'll break me again. I know. His eyes closed. And I'm terrified I already have. Then fix it, she said. Stay broken with me. Stay scared with me. But stay. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the passion they'd shared 5 years ago. It was apology and promise, grief and hope, everything they'd lost, and everything they might still have time to build. When they broke apart, Melissa was crying. I need you to know something, she said. That night you left, the night I hemorrhaged, I didn't tell you because I wanted you to feel guilty. I told you because you need to understand. I survived that. I survived raising 3 boys alone. I survived your father's threats, and the syndicate's eyes, and every moment of wondering if you'd ever come back. I'm not the girl you left behind, Yoon-sok. I'm not fragile. I'm not breakable. I know. His voice was rough. You're terrifying. She laughed, and then gasped as her body seized again. This time, the pain was different. Sharper, immediate. The baby, she managed. Yoon-sok, it's... He moved on instinct, years of crisis management kicking in. Checked her dilation, realized with stark clarity that they were out of time. Marcus, he shouted. I need the medical kit. Now. The next hour dissolved into a blur of intensity. Melissa's screams that she tried to muffle for the boys' sake. Yoon-sok's hands that had killed, that had built empires, now cradling new life. Marcus coaching him through the delivery with the calm of someone who'd apparently prepared for this exact scenario. And the boys, standing in the doorway despite Marcus's attempts to keep them away, watching their father deliver their sister with the same intensity they'd watched him stand down a cathedral full of armed men. When the baby finally came, small and furious and perfect, Yoon-sok understood what Melissa had been trying to tell him all along. This was strength. This messy, terrifying, beautiful act of creating life in the middle of chaos. He placed the baby on Melissa's chest, and she was crying and laughing and everything at once. A girl, Melissa whispered, her hand cradling the tiny head. A girl, Yoon-sok echoed, and something inside him that had been cold for 5 years finally, completely, thawed. The boys rushed forward, crowding the bed to see their sister, and Melissa made room for all of them. This family she'd built from nothing, this legacy of love that had survived despite every attempt to destroy it. Yoon-sok stood back, watching them, and felt the weight of his phone in his pocket. The device that held evidence of his betrayal, proof of his cooperation with federal agents, insurance that his father would never touch this family again. But also, the thing that had almost made him miss this moment. He pulled it out, powered it down, and set it on the dresser. What are you doing? Melissa asked, her voice exhausted but curious. Choosing, he said simply. He returned to the bed, to the space the boys made for him, and wrapped his arms around all of them. I'm choosing you, all of you, forever. Finn looked up at him, those 2 knowing eyes searching for the lie. He didn't find one. Okay, the 6-year-old said, and in that single word, Yoon-sok heard forgiveness he'd never thought he'd earned. Outside, the Texas sun was setting, painting the ranch in gold and crimson. Inside, a family, broken and rebuilt, and still figuring out what they were, held each other in the quiet after the storm. Melissa's hand found Unsok's, and she squeezed. "What do we do now?" she asked. He looked at the baby in her arms, at the boys pressed against their mother's side, at the woman who'd survived him and saved him in equal measure. "Now?" He smiled, and it felt foreign and wonderful. "Now we start over. No syndicate, no secrets, just us, she repeated. And in those two words, Unsok heard the future he'd thought he'd lost forever. The kind worth fighting for, the kind worth dying for, the kind, finally, worth living for. The ranch house settled into evening quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of new life. The baby's occasional whimpers, Melissa's exhausted breathing, the boys whispering in the adjacent room about their sister. Unsok stood at the bedroom window, watching darkness claim the Texas landscape. Behind him, Melissa shifted on the bed, and he turned immediately, the instinct to protect her now bone-deep and undeniable. "I'm fine," she said, reading his concern. Her dark skin glowed in the lamplight, her hair spread across the pillow in waves that made his fingers ache with memory. "Just sore, and trying to process that you delivered our daughter in the middle of nowhere." "Our daughter." He tested the words, and they felt foreign and perfect. He moved to the bed, sitting carefully on the edge. "Does she have a name?" Melissa's smile was soft. "I was waiting." "For what?" "For you." She adjusted the sleeping infant in her arms, and Unsok saw his own features reflected in miniature, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth. "I named the boys alone. Made every decision alone. I thought," her voice caught, "I thought maybe this time we could choose together." The simple act of inclusion, of being wanted, needed, trusted after everything, hit him harder than any bullet. "Grace," he said quietly. The name came from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd buried along with every other soft thing about himself, because she's the mercy neither of us deserved. Melissa's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. Grace Morrow song. "You kept your name," he observed. "I kept my identity." She met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't going to be erased just because you disappeared." The words should have stung. Instead, they made him respect her more. "I wouldn't want you to be anyone but exactly who you are," he said. "Strong, fierce, terrifying in the best possible way." She laughed, the sound soft and tired. "Sweet words from a man who just watched me scream through childbirth. Especially after watching you scream through childbirth." He reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse. And when she didn't, his hand found her face. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, the elegant line of her jaw. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Melissa. You survived me. That's no small thing." "I survived despite you," she corrected. "But there was no heat in it, just truth." "I know." His hand fell away. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worth surviving with instead of despite." The baby stirred between them, and Melissa winced as Grace's small mouth sought purchase. Unsok watched, fascinated and helpless, as Melissa adjusted her shirt with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 3 times before. "You can stay," she said, catching his hesitation, "unless it makes you uncomfortable." "Nothing about you makes me uncomfortable," he said honestly. "Everything about you terrifies me in ways I can't articulate. But uncomfortable? Never." She settled Grace to feed, and the intimacy of the moment, this fundamental act of motherhood that Unsok had never witnessed, made something in his chest constrict. "Tell me about them," he said. "The boys. I missed everything." Melissa's expression softened. "Finn is your son in every way that matters. Serious, strategic. He learned to read by 3 because he wanted to understand the books I was hiding from him. Quinn is my child. Emotional, artistic, sees the world in colors and feelings. He cries at movies and draws pictures of families that never include you because he doesn't remember you existed. And Flynn," her smile turned bittersweet. "Flynn is both of us. He's the negotiator, the peacemaker, the one who asks the hard questions no one else wants to voice, like whether I'm going to leave again. Exactly like that." She adjusted Grace carefully. "They're brilliant and damaged and perfect, and they deserve better than a father who appears and disappears like a ghost." "They'll have better," Unsok said. "I swear to you, Melissa, I'm not leaving. Not when the FBI comes. Not when the syndicate falls. Not when things get hard or dangerous or complicated. I'm staying." "Words are easy, Unsok." Her eyes held his. Staying is the hard part. Then watch me do the hard part. He stood, moving to the door. I'm going to check on the boys, make sure they're settled. Then I'm going to secure the perimeter, set up alerts, and make sure no one can touch this family. And then I'm going to sleep on that couch in the living room. And when you wake up in the morning, I'll still be here, and the morning after that, and every morning after that until you believe me. Melissa watched him, searching for the crack in his armor, the escape clause, the inevitable betrayal. She didn't find one. Okay, she said finally. Show me. He nodded and left, pulling the door almost closed behind him. In the hallway, he found Quinn sitting against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. You're supposed to be in bed, Yoon-suk said gently. Couldn't sleep. Quinn looked up at him with eyes that held too much understanding. Are you really staying? Yoon-suk crouched down, bringing himself to the child's level. Yes. Flynn says you're lying. He says all adults lie when they think it'll make us feel better. Flynn's not wrong about adults in general, Yoon-suk admitted. But he's wrong about me. I'm staying, Quinn. I promise you. Mom says promises don't mean anything unless you keep them. Your mom is right. Yoon-suk held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Quinn took it. So let me show you instead of telling you. Come on, I'll tuck you in. He led Quinn to the bedroom the boys shared, where Finn and Flynn were already in bed, or pretending to be. Yoon-suk could see their eyes gleaming in the darkness, watching, assessing, judging. He tucked Quinn in, the gesture unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Then he moved to Finn's bed. You don't have to do this, Finn said quietly. We're not babies. I know you're not, Yoon-suk said, but I missed 6 years of being your father. So let me have this. Let me tuck you in and check your windows and make sure you're safe. Let me be the dad I should have been from the beginning. Finn's jaw tightened, but he didn't protest when Yoon-suk pulled the blanket up and smoothed it down. Flynn was next, and he grabbed Yoon-suk's hand before he could pull away. If you hurt Mom again, the 6-year-old said, his voice steady and sure. We'll hurt you back. All of us. Together. Yoon-suk squeezed his son's hand gently. Fair enough. I'd expect nothing less. He checked each window, set up motion sensors using equipment Marcus had stocked, and stood in the doorway watching his sons breathe in the darkness. This was what he'd been missing. This ordinary, sacred act of fatherhood, and he'd burn the world down before he missed another moment. Dawn broke over the ranch in shades of gold and crimson, and Yoon-suk woke on the couch to the sound of small feet on hardwood. He was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn from the holster he'd placed under the cushion, before his brain caught up to the threat assessment. Not a threat. His sons. All 3 of them stood in the living room doorway, watching him with identical expressions of wariness and curiosity. You stayed, Finn observed, and the surprise in his voice was a knife to Yoon-suk's heart. I told you I would. He secured the weapon, making sure the safety was on. Did you sleep? Some. Quinn moved forward first, always the bravest when it came to emotional risk. Is Mom okay? Is Grace okay? They're both fine, still sleeping. Yoon-suk checked his watch. 6 a.m. You're up early. We're always up early, Flynn said. Mom needs help with breakfast and the house and everything. She works really hard. The casual revelation of how much his sons had to grow up too fast settled like concrete in Yoon-suk's chest. Not anymore, he said. From now on, I'm here. You get to be kids. We don't know how to be kids, Finn said with devastating honesty. Mom taught us how to survive. That's different. Yoon-suk knelt down, bringing himself to their level. Then I'll teach you both. How to survive and how to just be. How to play and make mistakes and not have to carry the weight of protecting your mother alone. The boys exchanged glances. That silent communication twins, triplets, seemed to master without effort. We have questions, Finn said finally. Okay, a lot of questions. I have time. Quinn pushed forward. Why did you leave? The directness of it stole Yoon-suk's breath. No preamble, no softening, just the question that had defined their entire lives. Because I was a coward, he said, and forced himself not to look away. My father told me that being with your mother would get her killed, that the syndicate would hunt her, that the only way to keep her safe was to disappear completely. And I believed him because believing him was easier than fighting for her. That's stupid, Flynn said bluntly. Yes, it was. Why didn't you call? Quinn asked. Even just once? To make sure we were okay? I tried. Yoon-suk's throat tightened. Once a year, on the anniversary of the day I left, I would drive past whatever address I could find for your mother. I never stopped. Never got out. Just drove past to make sure the lights were on and she was alive. It wasn't enough. It was pathetic and selfish, and nowhere near enough. You were spying on us? Finn's voice rose. I was trying to protect you from a distance, and failing at it spectacularly. Yoon-suk met each of their eyes in turn. I thought I was keeping you safe. I was really just keeping myself from having to face what I'd done. Did you know about us? This from Flynn. Did you know we existed? I suspected. The admission cost him. I paid investigators to watch your mother from a distance. They reported back that she had children. 3 boys, the right ages. But I never asked for details. Never asked for photos or names or anything that would make you real. Because if you were real, I'd have to confront what I'd lost. What I'd thrown away. The silence that followed was damning. Then Quinn, sweet Quinn, who saw the world in colors and feelings, stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a child's instinct to comfort, even when he was the one who'd been hurt. Yoon-suk's arms came around his son automatically, and the feeling of holding him, this child he'd never met, never comforted, never protected, broke something fundamental inside him. I'm so sorry, he whispered into Quinn's hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. You're here now, Quinn said simply. That's what Mom always says. You can't change the past, but you can show up for the future. Finn and Flynn moved forward then, joining the embrace with the reluctance of children who'd learned not to trust easily. But they came. They let him hold them. And Yoon-suk understood that these small, stolen moments of connection, was how he'd earn his way back. Not through grand gestures or speeches, but through showing up. Again and again and again. A sound from the doorway made them all turn. Melissa stood there, Grace in her arms, her expression unreadable. She wore one of his old shirts, something Marcus must have left in the house, and it hung off her frame in a way that made her look simultaneously vulnerable and untouchable. Breakfast, she said, her voice carefully neutral. If everyone's done with the interrogation, the boys scattered, heading to the kitchen with the quick obedience of children who knew when they'd pushed their luck. Yoon-suk stood slowly, meeting Melissa's gaze across the room. They needed answers, he said. And did you give them truth or comfort? Truth. They deserve nothing less. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. Come, eat. We need to talk about what happens next. The kitchen table became a war council. Marcus had joined them, his laptop open to news feeds that showed Yoon-suk's world collapsing in real time. Breaking. Song Syndicate patriarch arrested in federal raid. Korean-American crime empire falls. Dozens indicted in multi-state operation. Offshore accounts frozen. Billions in illegal assets seized. Melissa fed Grace while the boys ate pancakes, and the domesticity of it contrasted sharply with the magnitude of destruction playing out on screen. Your father's claiming you set him up, Marcus said, turning the laptop so Yoon-suk could see the footage. The old man was being led out of the Dallas estate in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. He's telling anyone who'll listen that you betrayed the family. Good, Yoon-suk said flatly. Let him. The evidence speaks for itself. What evidence? Melissa asked, her voice sharp. You said you've been cooperating with federal agents for 3 years. What exactly did you give them? Yoon-suk met her eyes, knowing this was the moment that would define whether she could truly trust him. Everything, he said. Names, dates, locations, bank account numbers, shell companies, every crime my father committed, every deal he made, every person he hurt. I've been recording our conversations, copying files, building a case that would guarantee he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. Why? Finn asked, and his tactical mind was already working through the implications. Why betray your own family? Because he wasn't my family, Yoon-suk said. You are. Your mother is. Even before I knew you existed. Even when I thought I'd never see Melissa again. I knew I couldn't be part of his empire anymore. So I made a deal. My testimony and evidence in exchange for immunity and protection for anyone I named as needing it. Me, Melissa said quietly. You named me. You and the boys, once I confirmed you existed. He turned to her, and the weight of 5 years of secret protection hung between them. Federal agents have been watching you since the day after I left. You just never knew it. Her face went pale. You've been what? Spying on me? Having me followed? Keeping you alive, he corrected. My father had a hit ordered on you. the same night I disappeared. I found out hours later and made the deal with the FBI to have them intercept it. They've been keeping you safe ever since. I didn't need, she started, her voice rising. Yes, you did. He cut her off, his voice firm. You were pregnant and alone and targeted by one of the most dangerous crime syndicates in Texas. You absolutely needed protection, even if you didn't know you had it. Marcus cleared his throat. The agents watching you reported back to a joint task force. Unsok fed them information. They kept you safe. It's been a 3-year operation to bring down the Song Empire, while making sure you and the boys never became collateral damage. Melissa stood abruptly, Grace startling in her arms. I need air. She walked out onto the porch, and Unsuk made to follow, but Marcus caught his arm. Give her a minute, he said. Finding out you've been watched for years, even with good intentions, is violating. I know. Unsuk pulled free. But leaving her alone right now is worse. He found her on the porch, staring out at the endless Texas landscape. Grace had settled against her mother's chest. Tiny hands curled into fists. I'm sorry, he said. For which part? Her voice was tight. The leaving? The lying? The secret surveillance? All of it. He moved to stand beside her, careful not to crowd her space. I made choices for you without asking. Decided what you needed without consulting you. Treated you like something fragile that needed protecting instead of the warrior I knew you were. I raised 3 children alone, Unsok. She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I built a life. I created contingencies. I taught myself everything from basic medicine to cybersecurity to make sure my sons would survive if your family came for them. And you're telling me that the whole time I had federal agents watching? Yes. Did they help? When I hemorrhaged? When I was alone and terrified and thought I was dying? The question gutted him. I don't know. I wasn't read in on the day-to-day, just the high-level threats. Of course you weren't, she laughed, but the sound was broken. You were playing chess with my life while I was living it in real time. I was trying to keep you breathing, he said, and his voice cracked. That's all I cared about. I knew I'd lost you, knew I'd ruined everything, but I could make sure you stayed alive, that you had a chance at a life, even if I wasn't in it. You don't get to be noble about this, she said fiercely. You don't get to act like surveillance and secrecy were gifts. You robbed me of agency. You made decisions about my safety, my privacy, my life without giving me a choice. You're right. He didn't defend himself, didn't make excuses. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry, if I could do it over. But you can't. She cut him off. We can't undo the past 5 years. We can't give back the time you missed or the choices you made or the ways we hurt each other. No. He turned to face her fully. But we can decide what happens next. Together. No more secrets. No more surveillance. No more decisions made in the shadows. From now on, we figure this out as partners, or we don't figure it out at all. Melissa studied him, her dark eyes searching for the lie, for the conditional escape clause. What do you want, Unsuk? She asked finally. Really want. Not what you think you should want or what you think I want to hear. What do you actually want? The question was simple and impossible. You, he said. The boys. Grace. This life on a ranch in the middle of nowhere with pancakes and interrogations and learning how to be a father I have no idea how to be. I want normal. I want boring. I want to wake up every morning and know that the most dangerous thing I'll face is whether Quinn drew on the walls again or if Finn hacked my phone. I want you, Melissa. In whatever way you'll have me. Friend. Co-parent. Housemate. I'll take anything you're willing to give. And if I'm not willing to give anything, her voice was soft, but the challenge was clear. If I decide that having you here is too painful, too complicated, too much of a reminder of everything we lost, then I'll respect it. The words cost him everything. I'll find a house nearby, close enough to be present for the kids but far enough to give you space. I'll show up for every moment you'll let me, and I'll disappear for every moment you won't. Whatever you need, Melissa. I'm not here to force my way back into your life. I'm here to earn my way back, if that's even possible. She looked at him for a long moment, then down at Grace, sleeping peacefully against her chest. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally. I don't know if what we had can be rebuilt, or if we're just 2 people permanently broken by the choices we made. I know, but I'm willing to try. She met his eyes. For them. For the kids. They deserve to know their father. They deserve to see what it looks like when two people who hurt each other try to heal together. Together, he echoed, and the word felt like salvation. Together, she confirmed. But Yoon-suk, if you break their hearts, I won't. You already did once, she said. Don't make it twice. He nodded, understanding the weight of the warning. This was his second chance. His only second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. 6 months later, the ranch had transformed from a safe house into a home. The trial was over. Yoon-suk's father had been sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. The syndicate had collapsed, its assets frozen, its soldiers scattered or incarcerated. Sino-Korean, revealed to be a deep-cover operative for a rival cartel, had been deported to Korea to face charges there, and Yoon-suk had become someone new, someone better. He stood in the field behind the house, watching Finn, Quinn, and Flynn race through tall grass under the late afternoon sun. Their laughter carried on the wind, pure and uncomplicated in the way children's laughter should be. Melissa approached from the house, Grace strapped to her chest in a carrier. 6 months had softened the sharp edges between them. Though the scars remained, they were learning each other again. Learning how to be partners in parenting, in building a life, in navigating the complicated terrain of trust after betrayal. Some nights, they talked until dawn about everything they'd missed. Other nights, the silence between them was too heavy to break. But they showed up, every day, for the kids, for each other, for the possibility of something worth building. They asked if we could get a dog, Melissa said, coming to stand beside him. The warmth of her body, close but not quite touching, was its own language. What did you tell them? That we'd discuss it, as a family. She emphasized the last word, and he heard the question beneath it. Are we? He asked. A family? Melissa considered, her hand unconsciously stroking Grace's back. We're something. Maybe not what we were. Maybe something better. Something built on truth instead of secrets. I'll take it, he said. Quinn broke away from his brothers and ran toward them, his face flushed with joy. Dad, did you see how fast I ran? Dad. The word still made Unsuk's chest tighten. 6 months, and he'd never stopped feeling unworthy of it. I saw. He caught Quinn as the boy launched himself into a hug. You were flying. Can we really get a dog? Quinn asked breathlessly. Finn wants a big one. Flynn wants a small one. I want a medium one. We'll talk about it, Yoon-suk said, and caught Melissa's small smile. As a family, Finn and Flynn arrived, equally breathless and hopeful. And for a moment, they stood there, all of them together, grass-stained and laughing and whole in a way Yoon-suk had never thought possible. Come on, Melissa said. Dinner's ready. They walked back to the house, the boys running ahead, and Yoon-suk's hand brushed against Melissa's. She didn't pull away, didn't lace her fingers through his either, but didn't pull away. Progress. Inside, the table was set. Marcus had joined them for dinner, a weekly tradition now. He'd become Uncle Marcus to the boys, the brother Unsuk had never had, the friend who'd helped orchestrate their second chance. They ate and laughed and argued about dog breeds, and it was so perfectly, beautifully ordinary that Yoon-suk had to remind himself it was real. After the boys were in bed, after stories read and foreheads kissed, and promises made to consider the dog discussion seriously, Unsuk found Melissa on the porch again. She stood in the same spot she'd stood 6 months ago, when she'd told him she didn't know if she could forgive him. Hey, he said softly. Hey. She glanced at him, and something in her expression made his pulse quicken. Not fear, not anger, something else. Something that looked almost like peace. I love you, he said. Not for the first time in 6 months. He'd said it dozens of times, quiet confessions that asked for nothing in return. I know I don't have the right to say it. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know. Melissa turned to face him fully, and the moonlight painted her in silver and shadow. She was devastating. She'd always been devastating. I know, she said, and I'm starting to believe you might mean it. Starting to? It's a process, Yoon-suk. But her lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Healing isn't linear. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But we're getting there, slowly, carefully, together. Together, he echoed. She reached out, her hand finding his in the darkness. Her fingers laced through his, and the gesture was more intimate than any kiss. Ask me again in another 6 months, she said. Ask me if I've forgiven you. Ask me if I love you back. Ask me if we're really a family, or just two broken people trying not to break our kids, and what will you say? Her smile widened. I don't know yet, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Unsuk squeezed her hand, and they stood there in the Texas night, two people who'd survived each other and were learning to survive with each other. The beginning after the end, the hard work of rebuilding, the terrifying, beautiful possibility of forgiveness. And somewhere in the house behind them, their children slept safely, surrounded by love instead of shadows. It wasn't the ending Unsuk had imagined when he'd stood at that cathedral altar 6 months ago. It was better. If Unsuk's story pulled at your heart, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from. Share this with someone who believes in second chances, and don't forget to subscribe. Some families are born, some are built. Let's keep building this one together.